Well, ladies and gentlemen, hello again. Welcome to another Reflected Reality Simulations video. My name is Graham. We're back in X-Plane 10 flying the Challenger 300 by Dennis Crouppen. This is a continuation of the previous video where we looked at a departure out of Genoa. Today we're going to fly the arrival into Catania using a combination of the built-in FMS and the radio navigation aids on the aircraft fitted with. You can see Mount Etna over here, Catania on the island of Sicily. So the sim's paused at the moment. I'll take the pause off and we'll have a look at what we're going to do. First thing, we're using the FMS to navigate. It's navigating with FMS 1 at the moment. We're going to a point called Pellin and then onto a point called COBBA. COBBA is the start of the DME Arc procedure and we need to be there at flight level 130. Currently at flight level 280, so that's approximately 15,000 feet to lose. To lose 15,000 feet, 3 times 15 is 45, so we need 45 miles, and I'll use 50 as a little bit of a margin on here. So what we'll do is we'll dial up the flight level 130 in the window already. The aircraft's still maintaining 280. It takes a while to scroll because it's changing in 100 feet increments. There we go. And we're probably finished with the half bank function as well, so we'll turn that off. I'm just going to use vertical speed to manage the descent. And if you've not seen my descent planning videos and radio navigation aids video, probably have a look at those as well, because I'm going to use some of the concepts from both of those videos in here. So although we're navigating to Pellin, I can use the FMS to see the track distance all the way to COBBA. The FMS goes on to Nassum, which is the initial approach fix, and then on to Catania itself. But we're going to use the radio aids to fly the Arc. I'm also finished with Mach hold, so I'll turn that off. So although this aircraft's not fitted with VNAV capability or with this FMS, we can still do a reasonably good job. It's important to note in the real world that the VNAV capability is used quite infrequently because it all depends on knowing the exact track distance you have to run. And with air traffic giving you vectors and other traffic to fit in with, it's very difficult to get that. So most pilots prefer to fly a slightly more conservative descent profile than what VNAV would give. Just approaching 50 miles, I'll click it onto vertical speed mode and then look for about 2,000 feet initially, and I'll bring the thrust back to idle. So 2,000 feet per minute, you can see my ground speed is around well, let's say 460 knots. So I'd need 2,300, about 2,500. Realistically, 2,000 to 2,100 is about the best you'll get at this level. But as we get lower down, we'll be able to maintain that higher speed, so, a higher rate of descent. So I'll be slightly above the profile in the early part of the descent and recapturing it as we get lower down. As we're descending as well, we'll make sure the pressurization is behaving. You can see the landing altitude up here. The pressurization system is mostly automatic. All we've got to do is set the landing altitude. We can do that with this knob here. Landing altitude of 0 is fine for Catania. If you've got any aircraft in your installations of X-Plane that don't have VNAV and you find it quite frustrating to operate that, just try using the 3 times table. The descent planning video that I uploaded a few months ago has basically a guide on how to make that work, and hopefully you'll find it really quite satisfying to do that as well. It's basically what pilots do in the real world. So as we pass flight level 240, that's going to be 11,000 feet to lose, 11, 22, 33 miles required. And I've got, I should have between 33 and 38. There you go, so I've just around about 4.5 miles of margin at the moment. That's all fine. The aircraft's about to sequence from Pellin on towards COBBA. Don't need to take any action here. We can just see the distance, track distance remaining. Big picture here says with a distance even cutting out the arcing procedure of 77 miles, 23 would be just about achievable there. Once it's made the turn, I'll just sync up the heading bug as well. As we're descending, I'll just show you some of the other settings we've got on the references. I've done my own performance calculations for this aircraft because the information that comes in the manual is quite sparse. So I've got a VRF speed for about 30 odd thousand pounds. Zero fuel weight is 25,000 pounds and 5,000 pounds of fuel. So 30,000 pounds, flat full arrival, flaps 30, VRF is going to be 123. Maybe do a video on how to assess the performance if you don't have that to hand as well. Everything else should be exactly as you see in some of the documentation for the Challenger. On the radio aids, Catania, the Charlie Tango Foxtrot, is tuned on nav 2, which is showing up here, and the ILS is already tuned on nav 1. If you look at the bearing source just quickly, OBS 1 that's set for the ILS, and OBS 2 is the crossing radial we're going to break off the arc procedure at. So passing through flight level 200, what I'll do is I'll put the seatbelt signs on, and to keep life straightforward, I'll put the landing lights on at this point. As we approach flight level 190, that's 6,000 feet to lose, 6, 12, 18 is what we need. And we've got, it'll just be about 22. So that's looking spot on. You can see we're still easily maintaining 2,100 feet per minute, speeds hovering around 280, 290, and that's slightly steeper than a 3-degree profile now. When we get to COBBA, we're going to turn on to a track of 144, I believe, to fly directly towards the Charlie Tango Fox. We're going to turn towards it till we get to 23D, and then right turn to a 21D arc. We'll maintain flight level 130 until we cross radial 310. So you can see the bearing pointer here is pointing to the Charlie Tango Fox at the moment. Once the tail sweeps through 310, around about here, we can start further descent. 4,000 feet to lose, that's 12 miles required, we've got 16, so it's all looking spot on. I'll do the procedure around about 250 knots, maybe 240, just to give us some thinking time as well. So I'll bring the speed target back, or the speed cursor back, just for something to look at on the speed tape. We can probably start to back the vertical speed off a little bit now. That'll help us slow down to 250 knots, 240 knots. So as we approach COBBA, the FMS wants to take us directly to the initial approach fix, but we're going to fly the arcing procedure instead. So what I'll do is I'll put the aircraft into heading mode just before COBBA. There's 1,000 feet to go and still 7 miles. You can see we could have backed the vertical speed off a little bit, but it's nice to be under the profile just to give you some margin there. And you can see that 3 times table works really well in this aircraft for the descent. We started off with 5 miles extra, just coming to the bottom of the descent, and looking about 5 miles spare. So it flies that profile really quite well. Remembering there's no auto thrust on this model, so as we level, I just need to bring the thrust up a little bit. So once it's captured, I'm just going to change the viewpoint there just to make it a little bit easier now. 2 miles to go. I'll click it into heading. We'll fly towards the Charlie Tango Fox, and I'll set 5,500 in the altitude window here. Change the navigation source so that we're looking at the nav2, which is Charlie Tango Fox. You can see it's moved around up here. I find it quite confusing how these distances shuffle around as we change the nav source, but perhaps that's how the real aircraft is. We're flying straight towards the VOR, and when we get to 23 miles, I'll make that right hand turn onto the DME Arc. Basically what we're doing is arcing around the slopes of Mount Etna here. There we go, start the turn. Make it 90 degrees initially. And I think if I zoom the range in on that, it'll be a bit less confusing. What I'm doing is putting the bearing pointer at 90 degrees to the aircraft, and then we'll refine it a little bit to try and fly this 21D Arc. I'm also waiting till I pass the 310 radial descent. So maybe just a little bit inside on the turn initially, it's no big deal. There we go, holding about 240 knots with manual thrust. About half a mile inside the turn, but we're coming back out, so that's fine. You see the FMS is sequenced to NASOM, that's the initial approach fix. I need to be at 6,000 feet or so by NASOM for all to work out. There's 310, so what I'll do is I'll click into flight level change and I'll bring the thrust off. That'll fly down at 240. And I'll just tweak the heading now to fly that arc correctly. So as we come round, I'll post a link to the charts in the video description, but as we cross the 271 radial, which is approximately what that pointer is there, you see 271 just as the tail comes up here as well. As we cross that, we'll start the turn on the final approach. There's 21 miles, and I'll just keep the turn coming. Just a little bit outside. Just edge the speed forward a little bit to help it descend. You see the airport's around about there. It's all looking reasonable at the moment. From the airfield we're about 21 miles. That would be quite high at the moment, we need about 7,000 feet or so, but we're going to keep flying this arc round. Need to get a little bit inside now. Nearly there. We zoom the range out, we can see the initial approach fixes here as well. So keep flying this arc, just about the correct point. So what we'll do is we'll turn in. And what I'll do is I'll change the navigation source over to the nav1. And that should be the ILS. Obviously we're a little bit far away at the moment, but be a reasonably good localizer. I'll click it into the approach mode just now. And again, just using the waypoints on the screen here to get that intercept. It should be good to start bringing the speed back just now. There's capturing the localizer. And we should get the glide slope in just a moment or so. Glide slopes in X-plane seem to be around about 18 miles. Let the speed come back to 220. And I'll just synchronise the heading as we roll out as well. There you go. Glide slope just inside and captured nicely. So let the aircraft fly down the ILS. And what we'll use is, the aircraft's still in a clean configuration at the moment. We'll just bring the thrust back to idle and let it creep back on the speed. The speeds I'm using for £30,000 say that I'm good clean down to 158 knots and then with flap 1 down to 138. So I've marked those on the references. It's maybe not what the bugs are intended for, but it just gives me the speeds to look at here. So clean 158 and flap 1 down to 138, although I don't need to go that slowly. Obviously I can extend them at any point inside the speed restrictions there. So now we're on the ILS, safely I can set the missed approach altitude as well of 2,000 feet. So still get a clean aircraft, we're using very little thrust, not making a lot of noise. I'll just bring the thrust up to maintain 180 knots now. .180 knots down to about 7 miles from the threshold is usually a good aiming point. 160 knots down to about 5. Okay, so I'll let the aircraft start to decelerate now. So take flap 1, flaps 10, sorry. There's flap 20, gear coming down. And flap 30. It's possible to fly the aircraft around really quite slowly in a clean configuration. In one of my future videos I'll have a look at how I generated those performance numbers, because it's very common in the sim world to find aircraft that don't really have a lot of performance information with them, or perhaps aircraft that don't really quite match up to the real world performance figures. So if you can calculate your own performance, it's really quite useful, and it's very straightforward. All you've got to do is assess the stall speed at a set weight and configuration, and then you can work out the rest of the speeds. So the aircraft's at VREF, exactly on VREF. We could maybe have about 5 knots on that, but to be honest, it's a lovely flat cam morning, so happy with where the aircraft is. And passing through 1,000 feet radio. Got the gear down with 3 greens, we've got flap full, and the missed approach altitude is selected. Looking perfect, so what I'll do is I'll take the autopilot out, I'll reset my view, autopilot coming out, and just follow these flight directors. Again, I'm more used to flying with the crosshairs flight directors rather than the single queue here, but we'll do the best we can. It's a really nice model to fly.
$500.
Just looking really at the pappies and the picture of the runway at the moment. Remember not to flare the aircraft too high as well, it's really quite a small aircraft. $100.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
There you go. Reverses. And finish with the reverse. Just roll to the end here. I don't have an axis band for joystick brakes, I only have the keystrokes, so it's either it's all or nothing with the brakes at the moment. I do need to find my rudder pedals and get them sorted out. Remembering this aircraft, the nose wheel steering is very ineffective at higher speeds, so we need to make sure we're right down to a sensible taxiing speed before we vacate at the far end here. There you go. Once we're taxiing straight away on the taxiway, we'll look inside and start doing some after landing stuff as well. So that looks okay. We'll put the speed brakes away, and the flaps up, put down the taxi light, and have the strobes off. Obviously in real life you wouldn't look away from the aircraft when you're taxiing it, that's why you've got 2 crew members. But if you don't have a long straight taxiway like this in X-Plane, the easiest thing to do is just come to a halt. You can probably turn the yaw damper off, and yeah, have the flight directors off as well. Other thing we can do is turn off the TCAS, so we'll put that just down to the transponder. We'll taxi down here, find somewhere to park, and shut the aircraft down. I think I mentioned on the previous video, it's really quite a satisfying aircraft to operate. It's got a little bit of system simulation in there, but it's very tolerant of the switches being completely in the wrong place to fly the aircraft. So you can fly it, basically turn the aircraft on and go fly. If you've not seen some of my previous videos, you maybe understand that the whole point in this channel is to look at some of the flying procedures, and most importantly have fun with the sim, using close to real world procedures if we can, but otherwise just enjoying the aircraft. There's a lot of good videos, people doing excellent cold and dark startups using almost exactly real world startup checklists, that sort of thing. But for me, it's just a case of getting in the aircraft, getting it set up, and going and enjoying it. And this aircraft lends itself to that really well. That being said, if we can keep it as realistic as we can as well, that's always nice. We'll park next to this, is it DC-9, MD-80? Probably an MD-80. We'll park next to that if we can. So before we turn on stand, we'll turn off the taxi light. This looks like a suitable stand here, so we'll turn. Okay. Set the parking brake. What I should have done as we're taxiing in, obviously, is start the APU as well. So I'll do that just now. Make sure the APU is on. APU generator. So that's perfect. We should be able to shut the engines down. Turn those off. Turn off the hydraulic pumps, I guess, as well. There's another one in here. We'll leave the fuel pumps as is. Don't need to bleed. We'll turn off the beacon and turn off the transponder. Windshield heat and probe heat, we should have always had those off as well. Let's have a look on the outside. There you go, so the beautiful Challenger 300 parked at Catania after flying the DME Arc procedure, then automatic ILS followed by a manual landing. I'll put a link to the charts used in the video description, and as always, any comments or questions, I really like to hear them. You've seen a full setup with aircraft and a departure followed by an arrival using a combination of the built-in FMS and the radio aids. I hope you find it enjoyable. If you do have this aircraft and you've got any questions about operating it, I'd love to hear them as well. I'm not an authority on this, I've not been near this sort of aircraft in real life, but perhaps with your comments we can have a look at it and see if we can understand a little bit more about it. Thanks very much for listening to me, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.